Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome to the Bourse Report. Well, it's been announced the budget will be delivered on Monday, October 2nd, 2017. And this week we take a look at the second part of our two-part series, which takes a review of how the government's finances and the state's finances have progressed for the year thus far. Last week, we reviewed the revenue side and looked at some of the trends in that area. Today, we're taking a look at the other side of the budget equation, the expenditure side of the story. So getting straight into it, based on central bank data up to May 2017 for the period October to May, government expenditure stood at just around 32.2 billion TT dollars, a marginal increase of just around 0.4 billion or 1.8% increase from the comparable period in October to May 2016. Again, no major changes in terms of composition. Here we can see that transfers and subsidies, as marked in red, accounted for just about 56% of overall expenditure thus far for the fiscal year, or about $18 billion. Wages and salaries, the second highest contributor to expenditure, was just around 6.9 billion TT dollars, or around 21% of total government expenditure to date. Taking another perspective of expenditure, we see that there has been some increase in current expenditure, or that is spending on goods and services consumed within 1 year, as opposed to capital expenditure. So we can see where some of the cuts have been coming back. And in fact, in October to May 2015, just around 10% of total expenditure was allocated to capital expenditure and 90% to current expenditure, whereas in October to May 2015-16 and 16-17, we can see that capital expenditure as a percentage of overall expenditure would have reduced to just around 5%, with current expenditure accounting for 95% of overall spend. So we mentioned last week that there were double-digit declines in revenues. However, there has been less than proportional declines in government expenditure, and understandably so. This has led to increasing the fiscal deficit, as indicated by a worsening fiscal balance. And here we can see for October 2016 to May 2017, the fiscal balance has been negative $9.4 billion, again based on central bank data. And you can see the slightly worsening trend, the worsening trend from October to May 2013-14 and going on into consecutive periods. So there's declining revenues, expenditures remaining relatively constant. What can be done to address this balance? Well, a couple of things. One, reduction of current expenditure, and there are some methods and initiatives that may be taken to do that. Secondly, there could be increased borrowing in the short term. Thirdly, drawing on savings. And finally, of course, the divestment story or sale of state assets. Turning first to trying to reduce current expenditure. Here we can see that in terms of the breakdown of transfers and subsidies, households accounted for the largest beneficiary of transfers and subsidies of about 33% of the total spend on this particular segment. And some initiatives that may be taken, well, the Honorable Minister of Finance did mention that there was a review being done to the fuel subsidy and a gradual phase out by 2018. So that might be something to expect in the coming fiscal budget. Also, a review of utilities rates such as water and power, with the RICs beginning their review of those rates, and some of those rates have not been adjusted in more than a decade. So another area in which there can be some reduction in spend or transfer of spend from the state to the citizenry. In terms of government borrowing, well, this would be more of a short-term measure, of course, and as we can see, government debt to GDP has been steadily climbing. Central government debt as at May 2017 stood at just about $90 billion TT. And with using 2016 GDP figures, we see that debt to GDP was 61.5% and 14.6% external debt to GDP is the external debt to GDP level. So with a self-imposed or guidance of around 65% in terms of a debt to GDP ceiling, what we would note is that there would be about just around $5 billion in additional capacity of borrowing relative to the 2016 GDP numbers. Where can the government borrow this? Well, they could do it locally, and it would cost them for 10 years just around 4.4% as a start, or internationally, given that there remains some appetite for Trinidad and Tobago US dollar denominated paper, and would cost them around in a similar vicinity of just around 4.5%. Of course, you can look at drawing down on our savings for a particularly rainy period that we are weathering right now. And as you can see, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund has been drawn on twice in recent periods. First in May of 2017 with just around $375 million being drawn, and most recently in March of 2017 with just about $250 million US being drawn from it. Now, this strategy remains a viable one. The portfolio has been performing well based on Ministry of Finance data. However, if the portfolio, which is invested in international equity and fixed income markets, does start to deteriorate or have negative performance, such a strategy would warrant review. And finally, the divestment story is one that has been considered strongly and has been executed to some extent. As we mentioned last week, there was the further additional public offering of TTNGL earlier this year, which raised about $850 million, as well as First, which raised about just over $1 billion. Other initiatives which were up for discussion in terms of divestments included the sale of TGU, which is expected to raise from a 50% equity sale between 3 and 5 billion TT dollars, as well as some other initiatives including ETEC, Lake Asphalt, and sale of CLF Group assets. Speaking of which, there seems to be some momentum gained in terms of the eventual liquidation of CLF and disposal of the assets. And taking a look at some of the core assets that could be up on the chopping block include a 25% stake of our Republic Financial Holdings, which could raise just around $4 billion, Angostura Holdings, which could raise around $2.4 billion, and OCM, a 23% stake of which could raise about just over $250 million TT equivalent at current prices. So what can we expect? Well, some measure of a combination of these initiatives, of course, in terms of reduction of current expenditure, as well as some borrowing initiatives and divestment, and of course, maybe some drawdowns from savings as well. So lots to think about as we lead up to the budget. That's it for this week's edition. For more information, give us a call at 226-8773. Visit our website at bourseinvestment.com or email us at invest@boursefinancial.com. Have yourselves a great investing week. This has been the Bourse Report.